Now, I am Dustin Baker. We are here for the February 16th edition. We're going to talk a little familiar topic, Kirk Cousins, only because the offseason starts with that man. It doesn't stop with that man, but it starts because whatever the decision made on him will dictate what the Vikings do henceforth. We have a new guest, new to the VikesNow network. It is Jason Harmon. Jason, how are you, my man?
Doing well. How about you guys? I'm excited to be here. I know I've been watching for a hot minute now, so I'm excited to join the crew.
Fantastic. Where can we find you on socials in case we forget at the end?
Twitter, mainly. I don't even remember my own Twitter handle by heart because there's a lot of dashes and numbers. But yeah, so _Jason_777. I would change it, but Elon would like flag my profile for like 3 months if I tried to. Yeah, so _Jason_777 on Twitter is the main place I scream about the Vikings constantly.
And you are based out of Arizona, correct?
Yeah, Scottsdale. Originally from California. Just got lucky enough. The first game my dad ever saw was the Vikings, and now I have depression. So worked out.
Well, that sets the tone. That sets the tone. All right. So, well, welcome. We hope that you'll stay as a participant in various capacities on VikesNow. We are going to start with Dakota. You have something about Kirk you want to chat about, and we'll go around the horn. What is the Kirk rumor or tidbit?
All right. Well, y'all, here's a new team that people are now projecting that Kirk Cousins will end up with if it doesn't end up being the Vikings. I don't think anyone really expected this to be a team, but it is now the Steelers. According to PFT, it is looking like supposedly Kirk Cousins' team is looking at the Steelers. However, upon reading further into the article and reading Sports Illustrated's article about it, I don't think that this rumor holds any weight. I still think that if Kirk Cousins does not sign with the Minnesota Vikings, it does look like Atlanta will be the team he ends up with. And the reason for that, and the reason I don't think we should give any weight to the Steelers rumor going around, is purely because when they were talking about whether or not this rumor or this information was coming from the Kirk Cousins team, the wording around it was really bizarre and vague. They were saying something along the lines of, it is not if it was a part of Kirk Cousins' team or somebody within it. It was, I don't know. It just, to me, it didn't read as normal English. Plus, I don't personally think that the Steelers are going to be moving away from their situation anytime soon. I think that they do still currently have faith in their current quarterback, although I would not be surprised if they probably pick somebody up in this draft just to have sort of that backup option. I don't think that Kirk Cousins is comfortable being in a position where he's going to potentially be playing second fiddle again. So that's the current rumor. Again, I wouldn't give it any really weight or anything in the current Kirk Cousins conversation that is being had.
So the primary X's and O's rumor would be the Falcons, because fantasy football managers know that they're just a quarterback away and a head coach. They got that from unlocking their weapon stable that, should be salivated over. I can see where the Kirk to Pittsburgh would work out, because they finished 10-7 with a group of morons at quarterback. And so in theory, Cousins healthy, mended Achilles, like clockwork, 4,000 passing yards, 30 touchdowns. They could probably F around and get to 11-6, 12-5. And then they're kind of in a precarious draft spot that we're familiar with. They're too good, like the Vikings in the past, to have a juicy draft pick. So they'd probably be stuck with Michael Penix, depending on his draft stock, or Bo Nix, who I think most of us don't want anything to do with as QB1. So I can see the weight to the Steelers rumor, but I think Atlanta makes more sense. Jason or Dakota and I wrong or right? Hit us with it.
I still think Atlanta's the favorite. And I think obviously Kirk is his main priority as far as, life and comfort is his family. And I know they have a lot of family out there. I like the conspiracies that started when he started posting about the Georgia mascot passing away, like, oh, he's already committing to Georgia. But the Steelers and the Pats are two teams I've kind of had on my back burner as possibilities, just given their situation. Obviously the Steelers and Pats in different spots, but being able to really bring in a veteran quarterback after, first round picks didn't really pan out for them, and Mac Jones and Kenny Pickett. I think with Pittsburgh, to Dustin's point, they are always competitive regardless of what's going on at QB. But if you pair Kirk Cousins, even coming off that Achilles with guys like Pickens, for example, like that is potentially a pretty fun offense compared to what it has been recently. I think ultimately, we all hope Kirk takes a discount to stay in Minnesota. What that discount should look like or could look like, we can debate. But, if he wants to go to one of these QB needy teams and chase a bag, I'm not going to blame the guy. In fact, he's earned every right to. So it's going to be interesting, but I definitely think there's going to be teams that get really quarterback desperate, like you said, that aren't in that prime draft spot and maybe don't want to depend on a second, third round guy who look at Kirk, they look at Fields, they look at these different options. And I think things are going to get really interesting here in the next few weeks.
The way to look at Kirk to Pittsburgh outside of the practicality of it as a rumor or the feasibility of will it happen is they are absolutely guaranteed to finish 9-8. And with Kirk, you can probably climb by 2 or 3 wins, assuming he's completely healthy and doesn't have an age 36 regression. So I don't know if Steeler fans would probably welcome it. I don't know. We have to poll that fan base. Brevin, Kirk to the Steelers as a rumor, possibility, the realism. What do you think?
It's definitely a possibility. I guess I'm never one to have a second team. I think having a second team is I won't say weird as to not offend people that have second teams, but I definitely have a soft spot for Pittsburgh. I've written for Pittsburgh for a website in the past. I think it would be a smart move. I don't know, because Pittsburgh's never really about like the flashy signings, and that would be the flashy signing of the offseason. Jason brought up a great point about like Kirk with Pickens, with Deontay, giving him like Jalen Warren, Najee Harris. And then that would be seemingly the first time Kirk would at least be healthy with a very consistent defense. So I don't know how much merit it holds. I think it'd be really nice. I mean, any team that's going to sign Kirk, Minnesota, whoever it is going to get a top 10 quarterback. And I know that age thing is scary, especially coming off the injury. But I think what a lot of people don't realize, it's not as much about the age as it is about the mileage on the car, right? So like Kirk Cousins, he became a full-time starter really late, or not really late in his career, but in like his mid to late 20s. Kirk has played like considerably less snaps than Derek Carr. And I don't think anybody thinks about Derek Carr as a super old quarterback. Definitely not a young quarterback, but I think people need to look less at the age and more of the tread on the tires. And Kirk's got the tread, even though one went flat at Lambeau Field last year. But whoever gets Kirk, Pittsburgh, Atlanta, whoever, it's going to be a good signing no matter what.
Another thing to mention in this chat is the Steelers are currently underwater via the salary cap by $14 million. Which means they'll have to do a lot of shit before they can entertain Kirk's probably $45 million. If he's not going to stay with the Vikings, he should go get the bag elsewhere. He should probably get the bag with the Vikings, truth be told. It's just whether or not that fits in the budget for a competitive rebuild. But yeah, you would have to have the Steelers do what the Vikings usually are tasked with doing, and that's getting out of the red. Thankfully, the Vikings aren't in that spot this offseason. All right, producer Ireland, your thoughts on Kirk to Pittsburgh?
Yeah, it's interesting because if Kirk Cousins goes to Pittsburgh, they are going to be in a perpetual state of 9-8, where like they're already there with just Tomlin refusing to ever have a losing season. And I feel like that would just, happen twice over with Kirk Cousins there, right? Like the Steelers are never going to have a losing season with Kirk. I mean, jokes aside, though, he's a good quarterback. They want to stay competitive in the AFC North. And you look around, you've got Lamar, Joe Burrow, the other quarterback, who I'm not even going to bother mentioning. Hey, let's just say it's Joe Flacco. Who knows? Maybe Joe Flacco steals a job in Cleveland, because I don't like the other one. But I still think there's a lot of validity to Kirk Cousins going to Atlanta. Because Raheem Morris was the defensive backs coach for Washington during Kirk's time there. So, and they also, Atlanta hired Zach Robinson to be their offensive coordinator. And if you don't know a ton about him, he's basically a McVay O'Connell influenced coach. I believe he was the passing game coordinator for the Rams under McVay. And I believe he was on the staff when O'Connell was as well. So if I'm Kirk and I'm looking at Atlanta, I have family ties there. They run a very similar scheme to what Minnesota is running right now under Kevin O'Connell offensively. And then they just have a ton of talent on offense too. You have Bijan Robinson, who is going to be an elite running back if he isn't already. Kyle Pitts. I'm not sure if Jonnu Smith is a free agent or not, but really solid tight end there. And then you have Drake London, of course, at wide receiver. So, you can make something happen with that offense. And the defense is really good too. That was like Atlanta's calling card last season. So, I mean, you have quite a few appealing things about Atlanta if you're Kirk Cousins. So we'll see what happens. As for Kirk Cousins with the Vikings, it's if I'm Minnesota, I don't offer anything more than a 1-year extension because I want to maintain that sort of flexibility with a rookie scale contract. If I give Kirk Cousins 2 to 3 years, I'm kicking the can down the road, so to speak. And you can make it work cap wise, but is it wise to keep kicking the can down the road with Kirk, or do you look at this quarterback class and say, hey, there's a lot of really good quarterbacks in this class, from Drake May falling to 3 potentially, to JJ McCarthy falling to 11, and then Michael Penix Jr. is still really solid despite the championship game where he struggled a little bit. But there's a ton of depth in this class, and you can easily find a solid starter for a few years at the very least.
I'll reiterate one more time for any newcomers to Vikings football or this show. There's this notion out there that the Vikings, because they have $28 million in dead cap into Kirk, that, hey, if he signs for 1 year, $35 million, it's only an extra $7 million. That's not how it works. The bill has already been footed for, or is already on deck for the $28 million. So if you signed Kirk for 1 year, $35 million, you're talking about $63 million over however long you want to spread it out. I think there's this erroneous notion that you can get them for $7 million because they've already paid $28 million. That's absolutely false. So that's something to keep in mind for any newcomers. And then on Atlanta and Pittsburgh, before we talk about WR3, the biggest thing to note is the Pittsburgh Steelers would have to give up on their first rounder from 2 years ago to pull the trigger there. Whereas the Falcons, the only thing they would do was to say sayonara to a third rounder, was a fourth rounder, whatever he was, Desmond Ridder, and nobody really cares about, throwing in the towel on a guy from that round. Whereas it's a fundamental breakdown in your scouting to say, you know what, we're done with Pickett. So that might also be more evidence to suggest, if Cousins leaves at all, that the Falcons could be the spot, and the familial through marriage ties probably don't hurt. All right, that is the Kirk chat. Now we are on to WR3. I'm starting with Jason, sir. What I want from you is twofold. I want a prediction from, what Kwesi does on the WR3 week 1 against whoever, and then what you would do if you were in charge in terms of procuring a WR3.
All right. So as with everything always this offseason, my prediction starts with the premise that Kirk is probably gone and that we trade up for a quarterback, therefore limiting those mid-round picks we have available this year. I would probably say, in my opinion, that it's really going to depend on if Jalen Naylor's healthy, because we had a lot of faith in him. And that kind of fell off with the injury and maybe some stuff going on behind the scenes. I like Brandon Powell, but we need some height in the wide receiver room. And Brandon Powell is 1 inch taller than me, and that's not saying much. So I would say I think if we do trade up, if we do, please don't remind me. If we trade up for a quarterback, I would say we probably stick with the wide receiver room we have. What I like to think that somebody like Thayer Thomas off the practice squad could show up and be the next Adam Thielen. Sure, we've seen it before. Who knows? Probably not. But if I had the draft capital in the mid rounds, and if I was the GM, I'm also biased here as a USC fan. I would go with Brendan Rice. He's 2 inches taller than JJ. Addison's only 5'10". Again, Powell's 5'8". He gets you just a little bit of height. Physicality's kind of been a little bit of a knock on him. But if you have JJ getting double teamed in the red zone constantly. You have Hawk back healthy, hopefully October, knock on wood. I think that's just another weapon. And we know the Vikings red zone issues were a killer last year. So I would focus on somebody who can get you some space and separation there and, hopefully have a little bit of a height advantage over some of the smaller defensive backs. So that would be what I do if we do have that second round pick, potentially move around a little. We know Kwesi and maybe get another third, maybe a fourth, depending on where he falls.
That's notably for newcomers. Once again, that's Jerry Rice's son. So it's not just some random dude from USC. It is the son of the GOAT, or at least GOAT per longevity. And I'll piss off the Randy Moss fans on the GOAT chat. But yeah, Brendan Rice is a little not crazy fast. But those bloodline guys, I swear to God, they rarely really show up and be awful. Like Joey Porter Jr. is an example of one that's really, really good. Asante Samuel's pretty good. My prediction is that the Vikings end up pursuing free agency for somebody like DJ Chark, who's a little bit more of a deep threat. What I would do is I would have a competition. I'd re-sign Brandon Powell because he's already shown his utility, and I would sign Rashid Shaheed from the Saints because he's only going to cost about $2 million, and I think he could be fun inside the Vikings offense. So my proposed solution is going with Rashid Shaheed, who's going to be a free agent. And I'm assuming that the Vikings are going to have to keep this spot pretty affordable. They're already spilling in assets to Jefferson's probably $30 million per year contract, if not more. And then we already know Addison is the real deal. So I would keep this spending low with the pretense that you're going to have to spend on edge rusher and other stuff. Dakota, your prediction and endorsement for WR3.
I mean, I'm kind of gonna have to echo Jason here. I think with all of these kind of like higher end re-signings that the Vikings are dealing with this offseason, Danielle Hunter, JJ, potentially Kirk, they're gonna want to go cheap. So I wouldn't be surprised if we keep with the room that we currently have. I think Brandon Powell absolutely stepped up incredibly when JJ went down as our wide receiver 3, and we had to see KJ Osborne in that wide receiver 2 situation. I think I would probably agree again with Jason in his idea of drafting Brendan Rice. I'm also a little bit biased towards him. I lived in Chandler, Arizona for about 3 years, so anyone from that area instantly I love you. But I think overall, if you look at just kind of how young our wide receiver room would be if we were to pick up Rice, it would be like 2 deep times a million just with looking at his stats in general. And I think, if the goal from the Kwesi KOC camp is to get a younger, faster, harder team, that would include a wide receiver room. And so picking somebody up like Rice would obviously play to that goal. And I think, honest to God, it would just be attractive for any young quarterback that we would draft too. So yeah, like I said, I'm just going to have to echo Jason on this one.
No, it's all good. Another thing to lift up is last offseason, getting closer to draft time, the Vikings very tangibly could have selected Deontay Banks, a cornerback, or Joey Porter, but they chose to get richer at wide receiver. So they've shown it's a priority. So you have schmucks like me who are saying, yeah, just sign some guy from the Saints. That may be incorrect because they've already said, you know what, we're not afraid to get rich at wide receiver. They have the precedent for that. All right, Brev, what do you got? You know the topic.
Yeah, so my prediction is actually going to go based off the scenario that we re-signed Kirk. He comes back to Minnesota, and we end up taking the best defensive player available in the draft at 11 with the stick and pick. Jason is not only is Jason immensely good looking, he's also very right that this wide receiver room does lack height. But where I would want them to go would be in the second round because he should be there unless the team is really high on him, which I wouldn't blame him at all. I wouldn't be surprised. But Malachi Corley out of Western Kentucky, we're trading that height for speed. He was literally named the Yak at Western Kentucky. But he's going to be a top 64 pick for sure. So he'll be in the first 2 rounds. I can see him easily going top 50, and we are right in that range. I said, I believe last week, I wouldn't mind seeing Minnesota go running back there, but they could spend the money in free agency that they would on a receiver on a running back because the running back class in free agency is really deep this year. So that's what I would want them to do. My prediction with Kwesi is what I'm really afraid of, and that he will re-sign KJ Osborne and give him money. I really hope he doesn't do that, because KJ is a free agent. We mentioned Brandon Powell; he's a free agent, so one of them would have to get re-signed to go along with what I think Kwesi would do. I wouldn't mind seeing Powell back. I don't think he's a true wide receiver 3, but I think we're gonna end up giving KJ Osborne an extension, which would really upset me, to put it lightly. I'm not a KJ Osborne fan. If you follow me on Twitter, great guy, awesome dude, ridiculously inconsistent on the field. So that's what I think they'll do, and I hope it's not what they do.
Well, he saves people from burning cars, man. No, well, he does, but that's not any reason for another contract in Minnesota. If they do that, I have mentally written off Osborne as a Viking. I think he'll get more money in free agency, because a lot of general managers won't know some of the warts that we saw last year. But it would really be like the Alexander move from last year, where you rested on the laurels of a locker room guy more so than a production guy. And it's just, in theory, if Osborne wanted to come back for 2 or 3 million, like my Shaheed idea, I could be like, yeah, I guess I see. But I'm going to guess that he thinks as a wide receiver he can get more than that, and I'm right there with you. It would be a very Madison-esque move to just roll with Madison or with Osborne last again. All right, Tyler, you are rounding out the show with WR3 thoughts.
Yeah, so one name that would be really fun is Laviska Shenault. You're kind of going up the same like Shaheed lane, where it's like, here's a guy who can do a lot of things, and he's probably not the most pure wide receiver, but imagine Shenault in a Kevin O'Connell offense where you're using him as like a gadget player. Like that would be so much fun. And no disrespect to KJ Osborne, but you're not really looking at him like a jet sweep weapon or any of those things. So I don't know. I personally like Shenault, but it honestly wouldn't surprise me if we re-signed Osborne, just because I know the coaching staff likes him quite a bit. So, I mean, we'll see. I mean, we did re-sign Bradbury after his rookie contract, and that kind of shocked me. So, like, it wouldn't be the first time the Vikings doled out a mid-sized contract for a role player who has a lot of value on the team, at least according to coaches, even if the fan base doesn't like that particular player. But I also wouldn't be opposed to just drafting a wide receiver. Like, what if we drafted Christian McCaffrey's brother? I think his name's Luke. I think that'd be pretty cool. He plays wide receiver. But I don't know how high it is on the priority list, trying to get a new wide receiver 3, because you already have Jefferson, you have Addison. Maybe if they feel like they can get a good value in free agency, that they pursue it heavier, knowing that TJ Hawkinson's going to be out for the start of the year. So, yeah, we'll see.
Notably in this draft, offensive playmakers, you have Frank Gore's son, Frank Gore. Then you have Brendan Rice, Jerry Rice's son, and Luke McCaffrey, who is Ed McCaffrey's son, Christian McCaffrey's brother. So, there's a lot of bloodline players that inevitably, when one of those guys goes to whatever team, that team is going to think they have the next big thing. And I bet you 1 or 2 of them pan out. All right, group, random. Any closing arguments from anybody before we log off for the week? Jason, any closing arguments? First timer guest here?
Yeah, I mean, with the KJ stuff, he's one of those guys who's obviously loved in the locker room, but I don't think you can look at what he did this year, or shall I say the lack thereof, and in any good faith give him anything less than an incredibly cheap contract. He had his chance to shine this year more than ever. He had some great moments over his time with the Vikings. He was the guy on a lot of game-winning drives, things like that. That's one of those moves. I tweeted last night that I think forming any solid opinion on Kwesi just yet is a little interesting to me, given the fact of just how much was dependent on setting up this offseason. That would be a move that moves me into the red a little bit on him. Just wondering what the hell we're doing. I do think if Kirk comes back, that odds of him coming back also increase because Kirk likes his dudes. I call it the Sean Mannion syndrome. He has very specific guys he likes to keep in the locker room. So I don't know. I mean, anything can happen. This is the most stressful and exciting offseason ever for the Vikings. And if it, well, okay, since Favre watch, but if we just end up running it back again, I'll be honestly a little disappointed if we keep the exact same core.
I will say in closing too,
And I don't
not
think
only,
they'll do that. I think.
oh, sorry. No, not only like, can we get that on a hashtag Kirk likes his dudes? No pause. And then
Loves
I
his
do want to
boys.
tell the viewers to keep a lookout if they enjoy Jason on the show today, that there may or may not be content coming with us on this channel. And our shirts may or may not be on or off.
On. They'll be on.
You're telling me
Okay,
Brev is going to be the first to start selling merch on this channel, is what you're saying?
No, he's going to take.
No, he was saying
remove his
shirtless
shirt.
podcast, which
The
I have not
shirtless
signed a
podcast.
contract on yet.
We'll call it Only Vikes.
I want
Notably
nothing
on
to do with
KJ
this
Osborne.
podcast.
No, you're going to be included. That's the big kicker here.
No, Brev, I already
no,
got it. If we're
notably
gonna
on-
go shirtless, it has to be Magic Vike, like Magic Mike. It's too perfect.
It's done. It's done. Get the presses ready.
But if
Who do you
I'm
think
involved,
has
I
the
get
better
to keep
beer
my shirt
belly?
on, right? Right? I get to keep my shirt on.
No, yeah, you're good. Well, that's
Oh,
fine.
thank God.
Brev, do you got a beer belly?
Maybe a little.
Little. Jason, you got a beer belly?
On
I have the dad bod. I'm 6
Dad
months
bod.
in, man. It's where you lose weight and your pants don't fit, but your stomach gets fat because you're just in dad mode all the time and you're just eating whatever you can. So that's where I'm at.
Sick.
for viewers that care, I have neither. I don't know if that matters or moves the needle. I was going to say on KJ Osborne before we went off the rails is he had a contract year, which is usually historically when a player balls out, but he regressed. His numbers got worse and his eye test, regressed as well. So that is that. All right, group. We'll talk to this particular group again. Jason, you'll keep us posted on the new
you guys
show
just
stuff,
let me
no matter
know.
what the title.
We're
All right.
working on ideas.
All right, guys,
We're
we'll talk
working on
next week. Take
ideas
it
for
easy.
sure.
All right. Later, guys.